All right, it's 7 p.m. We are going to begin this regular meeting of the Rutherford Board of Education, January 22nd, 2024. We'd like to ask everyone who can to please stand, face the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll ask Mr. Kelly to please take roll. Mr. Bogosian?
Present.
Mrs. Cole? Here. Mr. Johnson?
Present.
Mr. Healy? Here. Mrs. Jones? Mr. Mazzone?
Present.
Dr. Racine? Here. Mr. Schreiber?
Present.
Dr. Omari? Here. Thank you. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meeting of public bodies of which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the Rutherford Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place posted on the bulletin board outside the Borough Clerk's office, mailed to the Herald, South Bergenite, and the Record newspapers, and filed with the Borough Clerk. Hard copies of the agenda are available in the meeting room, and the agenda is posted electronically on Friday before the meeting date on the district's website at www.rutherfordschools.org. Subsequent to the meeting, a video of the meeting will be updated to the district's website, www.rutherfordschools.org. The video links can be found by opening the Board of Education link and clicking on Public Meetings and then Videos. So board members, there are two sets of minutes in your packets to approve. One is from the regular meeting, the other is from executive session, January 2nd, 2024. Any comments, questions about those? Hearing none, I'll ask Mr. Kelly to please enter those. And so we are excited this evening to welcome Alex Felice from Lurch, and Bliss, our auditor, to do a presentation for us on our audit. So welcome. Come on up to the mic, and we look forward to your report.
Thank you. Alex Parise, Lurch, and Bliss. We've just completed your June 30th, 2023 audit. Everyone should have received the annual comprehensive financial report, which is the bigger document in the packet. So the district received unmodified opinions in the audit, which basically means that it's a clean opinion. There were no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies. It's the highest level that can be achieved. That's for Mr. Kelly there. If you guys want to follow along on page 76 in the bigger document, I'm just going to briefly go over your general fund balance. Your general fund is your operating fund in the district. At year end, June 30th, 23, the district had approximately $9.5 million in fund balance, but there is restrictions to the fund balance. There's actually three categories. There's a restricted category, an assigned category, and an unassigned. The first restriction is your capital reserve. This reserve is restricted for your capital projects, all of which are in your long-range facilities plan. There's approximately $5 million in your capital reserve, but $3 million of that is utilized in your current 23-24 budget. So the balance of $2 million is available today for use with any of the projects in your long-range facilities plan. You have $100,000 in your maintenance reserve. These are for expenses in your required maintenance lines that are in your comprehensive maintenance plan. Excess surplus, approximately $968,000. This is tax relief that's generated from your budgets. $500,000 of that $968 is in your current 23-24, and the balance of $468,000 is going to be used in your 24-25 budget that Mr. Kelly is probably working on at this moment. In your unemployment compensation reserve, we have $168,000, and that's restricted for unemployment claims to the district. Your encumbrances of $1.5 million, these are your open purchase orders that were committed at year end. that roll over into the subsequent year because the goods or services were not rendered. So those are restricted for the encumbrances. And 100,000 was designated for subsequent years, which means that it was just basically to balance the budget in your 23-24 year. And lastly, your unassigned, which is your 2% max that the state allows, so it could be used for anything, is approximately 1.5 million. As far as the recommendations in the district, we had one recommendation that was addressed with Mr. Hurley and Mr. Kelly at our exit conference. It's a general comment. It has to do with year-end liabilities being reviewed for accuracy and whether it's classified as a payable and encumbrance. But we don't, we determined to be a general comment. It's not the material. And a corrective action is on tonight's agenda that addresses the recommendation. Other than that, if there's any questions regarding fund balance or the loan recommendation in the audit, I can take those at this time.
Questions or comments?
Thank you.
I would just like to thank you and thank your colleagues. As you know, the board knows, right, we had a new auditor this year, a new audit company, and it was a very smooth process, a very professional and efficient process, and that's appreciated by Mr. Kelly and I and the budget managers and the board. So thank you for that. And, we look forward to working together.
Thank you. I also want to thank, Mr. Kelly's staff and Mr. Hurley's staff. This was our first year, doing the job, and, it's smooth. I mean, there was no hiccups. Everything that we requested, we received. And I just want to congratulate. I just heard that Mr. Kelly put in his retirement, and I just want to wish him luck.
If we had a lot of findings, it would be a resignation. But the fact that it was virtually a clean audit is a retirement. I do want to echo the amount that goes into a nearly $50 million budget and the amount of work that we've said this before, but it never gets old, that Mr. Kelly and his staff does to make sure that everything is running smoothly and efficiently, and that the programs that we put in place for our students are funded completely, is I think recognized every year. It doesn't get recognized during the year. We have some administrators and supervisors here who know when I talk to them about leadership roles, so the one thing that you don't really get is what goes on in the business office. You really don't. But we get it every year when this time comes, and to get the constant clean reports and the efficiency is a credit to Joe and to his staff. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Well said. I don't have anything to add. I'd just echo Mr. Hurley's thank you for all of your hard work. The summary was great, and so we really appreciate it.
Great. All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too. You too. Thanks.
All right, so we're going to move on now. Our student representative, Poppy Vimpson, could not make the meeting this evening, so she'll be back for her report. And now we have a special report that we're all very excited about in regard to our academic committee. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Hurley for introductions.
Thank you. As the board knows, I think the public knows, we in the district have been working now for over a year on several areas of our academic programs. And the board has been hearing about and implementing, in some cases through curriculum instruction, through policy, some of the changes and some of the revisions that are going on. These committees are not, they're ongoing, right? And a lot of the work is ongoing. And quite frankly, I don't think, some committees may sunset, but we're going to have other committees come on board, because I think it's very healthy to keep taking these dives and reflections and revisions into your programs. So we have probably 50 teachers, give or take a few, that have been working on these committees throughout the year, and they are chaired by the ladies and gentlemen that are here tonight. We're going to give a brief overview. I don't know what order you're going in, okay? So I'll just say that Mr. Ursulisi and Ms. Yoda, over there, they are chairing the literacy and Social Studies Committee. Mr. DeBarry and Ms. Schmedding are chairing the Math and Science Committee. Ms. Saxon and Ms. Schmedding are chairing the Science Committee. And then Dr. Hopkins and Mr. Ryan are chairing the Academic Alignment Committee, which is a name Mr. Ryan came up with. We're still not sure exactly what that means. And and Mr. Ryan and Ms. Saxon are chairing the Profile of the Rutherford Graduate, which is going to also be an ongoing. So I asked all these folks to kind of give you a brief overview, see where we're at. So I'll turn it over to whoever is going to go up there first. And it is Mr. Ryan and Dr. Hopkins.
So to be clear, the academic alignment was a group effort in naming, and all this has been great because it's been grassroots, coming from the teachers and a collaborative effort. You can see by just our general vibe how well we work together, and it's just the last year has been really great and exciting, and really found some great stuff out. So we'll begin with the academic alignment committee that the committee named.
The committee name.
Not myself.
That's true. You actually asked for the Mr. Ryan committee. Right.
So we actually began as in February of 23, when this all started, we began as the grading committee. But as we met and we started to get feedback from the members of the committee and look at the things that we wanted to address, what came up was articulation, which I think you're going to hear across the committees. When we all came back together, all the heads of the committees, what we found out was that it was kind of brought up everywhere, right? What was going on needed to be articulated across the schools. So hence the Academic Alignment Committee was now born of the grading committee. So what we focused on initially, what we thought would be actionable and things we could, excuse me, actually put into place this school year and next school year were two of the things that we focused on were midterms, finals, and benchmarks. We were hoping to have that into place this year, but when you think about scheduling and things that have to be done on the back end in terms of grading and percentages and things like that, we're really going to implement that in the 24-25 school year to give those policy changes and things like that some time to happen. But the other thing that we did put in place for this year were some honors placement for students in grades 6 through 9. One of the things that really rose to the top besides the alignment was rigor. So we were looking to increase the rigor. So the thought behind the midterm finals at the high school, benchmarks at the middle school, was giving students an opportunity to sit for a longer amount of time to show some stamina and some rigor on assessments that would be hopefully reflected on state assessments. And then also within the honors category, honors placements in 9th grade, and then the advanced courses and in 6th and 7th grade as well. So that is what we have done and what is kind of coming into place now. And then Mr. Ryan is going to take over in terms of where we're going.
So the future, where we're going, we found a real need to look at the alignment aspect of RTI, 504s, and IEPs to make sure that they're aligned throughout the district, that each building has using the same common language, same common goals, so that we're all on the same in line or on the same boat in terms of what's being put in the 504s, what's being put on the IEP. So one of our recommendations is maybe to have an offshoot of this committee looking at those and have a specific committee looking at RTI, 504, and IEPs. We're also looking at common language for grading, assignments, rubrics, to make sure that what's happening in one building is going on in another, so it's consistent. So parents understand how we're grading and students understand how we're grading. So we're consistent across the board. So we're looking at that as well. We're also taking a dive into ChatGPT, AI, looking at those effects on what's coming our way, how we're going to handle the new concept of plagiarism, how we're going to look at it, and maybe how we have to address it in policy and regulations and things like that. So that's what we're looking at. And also we're looking at data collection in general, just trying to, a long-term data collection to understand these trends going on throughout the district. And again, to make sure we are aligned as one Rutherford, as we say, we're all on the same page in terms of these things. So that's our big picture goal we're moving into.
One of the things before we move on to the next committee, each of these committees, also we've reached out to other districts, either directly by talking to them or visiting, indirectly by going to their websites. by the professional organizations that we belong in to speak with folks. And, we met today, for example, Mr. Ryan, Ms. Saxon, and I met with Dr. Matthew Murphy, retired Superintendent Ramsey. We met on the profile of the graduate, and he brought up a term which is kind of connected to what they just were talking about. Some of this stuff is equity issues, right? When you heard Mr. Ryan and Dr. Hopkins talk about being on the same page, right? So a student should expect the same education, the same concepts of assessment and accountability, whether they're in 5th grade or 6th grade, whether they're in Washington or Lincoln, right? There should be more consistency, and that's an equity issue. So we're looking at a lot of things here, right? It's like peeling an onion. You start looking at one thing, you start looking at other things. But so the changes, and we've discussed some of these changes already. In fact, there's policy changes on the agenda tonight to address some of this. Who's next? And if the board has questions or comments, I think that'd be better to let all the reports go, and then we can go.
Good. All right. So what I can honestly tell you is this has been an invigorating process. And like Shannon, or like Dr. Hopkins was saying, the name change, we started as the English and Social Studies Committee as the supervisors of English and Social Studies. And what we discovered when talking to the teachers who were on this committee is that it was much broader than this. So it started with a simple name change. We became the Literacy Committee. And I think what's been very exciting for me was that none of this was top down. This is all from the teachers. No one said we must institute this change. Every single thing, every single bullet point that you see here came from a discussion we had with teachers or that teachers brought to our committee after canvassing their home school. There are also some top-down changes that are coming from the state of New Jersey. There are new standards in the English language arts that have to be in place for September. We were ahead of the game because of what the teachers had already asked for in meeting some of the new standards when the new NJSLS go into effect in 2024. So where are we right now? The teachers expressed a strong desire to get back to basics in the English language arts. They wanted the old school vocab book. We're not going as old school as diagramming sentences, but we are going as old school as circle the common noun, underline the action verb in grades 3 through 5. In grades 6 through 12, it's not a textbook, it's a virtual textbook, it's IXL. And those are still being taught via the specific skills, the specific standards. Every single grade level has a certain set of standards that they are expected to meet before they progress to the next level. And the same is true with vocabulary. Vocab for, my gosh, the past 15 years, the research told us when you teach vocabulary, it should happen through the literature that you are teaching, okay? It's not working, okay? What we are seeing now is a shift back to the old school vocab books. We're gonna give you 20 SAT words. We're gonna use those. We are gonna use them in context. We are not just gonna drill and kill where you have to memorize them and take a quiz. We are gonna make them part of our everyday life. That's in place right now in grades 9 through 12 because we had the funds to do it right away. As soon as the teachers asked and we agreed as a committee, we were able to do it. Common Lit, if you think of your old literature textbook where you turned to the chapter on Renaissance poetry and then there was a chapter on whatever, Common Lit is your literature textbook. It is just online. What's beautiful about this is that it can be done paper and pencil as well. I teach Honors English 300. I've moved to a lot of paper and pencil because there are so many more ways for it to become ingrained in a kid's memory when they're reading and writing on paper and committing it. The handwriting's a little rough. That's the new standards, and I know you're excited about that, Mrs. Jones. And then our last piece was the vertically articulated research curriculum, and that is really where the name change came from, because all too often research happens in the English classes. And then kids get to college, not many of them become English teachers or have an English major. So they needed to learn how to do research in other areas, and I'll let Ms. Yoda jump in here.
So we wanted to, one of the major issues that we were noticing too was not only in the social studies world is that students, finding credible resources and putting together organized research. So we've already in the high school, all 10th grade students completed their research project with their teachers in whatever level of US history that they're taking, along with the library media specialist, and completed a project where they had to put together organized research, find credible resources, and also properly use MLA formatting. They're also working in the health classes in grade 12 on health research and some of the same things, putting together organized research, finding credible sources, using those sources to back up arguments, and then also with citations, looking at APA citations. So that's just a great thing that they're being exposed to different types of research methods and different types of citation which they can encounter when they go on to different colleges or universities.
And the citation piece, that comes from anecdotal conversations with students who graduated. They come back, they visit, and we say, what could we have done better? And a lot of them, especially the kids who go into the social sciences or go into the business realm, they say, well, what is APA and why didn't you tell us what it is? So that's why we pushed it in, and it's in the health curriculum. It's a perfect place to segue as they leave 12th grade going into their freshman year of college. So where are we going? We're expanding the vocab book program. That's going to go into grades 4 through 8 starting in 24-25. We are also working on some NJSLA test prep and infrastructure standardization, and that speaks to what Mr. Ryan was saying. Every building handled test prep a little bit differently. In some buildings it was graded, in some buildings it was left to the teacher to figure out, in some buildings the time frames were different. So we just thought it would be important, as we look towards the idea of standardized test scores, to standardize our preparation a little bit as well. Our common reading and writing terms, again, that goes back to what Mr. Ryan was saying, and a lot of our committees do overflow. What a child learns to call a thesis statement in grade 4 should also be called a thesis statement in grade 5, and not a main idea or not something different, because we want it to follow with the kids. So regardless of whatever program it is that we're using, we want the language to follow, because it just makes more sense that way. Yeah.
And that's across disciplines as well. So social studies, to what they were speaking about as well, social studies and ELA are using common rubrics from grades 6 through 12. So we're not reinventing the wheel where you're learning, like you were saying with thesis statements, you're learning it in ELA, you're learning it in English. It's something that you can continue on in social studies. So they're not learning 10 different ways to do one thing.
Yeah, you don't want to play getting to know you every time you start a brand new class or a brand new teacher. The next piece is the phonics scope and sequence. This was born of a discussion that we had with our reading specialists in Lincoln, Washington, and the Kindergarten Center. And then, surprise, when the new standards came out that go into effect next year, there is a very robust addition to what is expected with phonics. Thankfully, Rutherford has always had a very balanced approach when it comes to literacy. Our phonics program is strong. What we are looking at now is, based on the standards, do we need to make any shifts to make sure that what we do in second grade is what the new standards say should be done in second grade? And then the last two pieces I'll turn over to Ms. Yoda, and that's social studies.
So in the same thread of talking about vertical and horizontal articulation, we had discussions in our subgroups about integrating social studies. The best way to get social studies into grades 1 and 2 is to continue integrating it into ELA. And one of the easiest ways with the new reading program are through class libraries, which we're going to continue to do. And then again, talking about vertical articulation, I'm very excited that we're going to start to infuse the TCI social studies program, which we're already using in grades 4 and 5, which is a real inquiry-based approach to teaching social studies. We're going to start to infuse that in 3rd grade. So it'll be a great program to bridge that gap between grades 3, 4, and 5.
Thank you. And to, yeah, I'm sorry, Brian.
No, I was just, my last piece was just going to say, we get to stand up here and tell you all of this, but it has been so amazing working with the teachers in our committee and on the subcommittees. Our teachers said, well, you know what, we really want to go a little deeper in phonics. They recruited teachers in their own buildings, and then we would all come together. This has been a true grassroots, for lack of a better word, actionable, I don't know what the word is,
Yeah,
but it's been exciting. It's been very exciting.
It has been exciting to see the excitement from the teachers and the
Yeah.
passion from the teachers, so.
Because this really did come from them.
Yeah. So, thank you.
Thank you. And to echo the idea about the, when the standards came out and I'm plowing through them, things that we were talking about 6-7 months ahead of the release of the standards are permeated throughout the standards. And, one of the things, social studies, you're going to hear about science at some point, either next or after that, in the K-3 level, right? It's often lacking. And, informational text is all over the standards in literacy. So, we had to get on board with the idea you could teach literacy through science. You could teach literacy through social studies. And the administrators of the buildings are actually meeting on Friday to take a look at their schedule for next year to see how they can modify time allotment to make sure that social studies and science are appearing in that level without losing time on literacy, because you're just approaching it from a different path. So, this is generating a lot of conversation, a lot of thought, some major changes, some subtle changes, but like you've heard so far, is coming from the folks who are in the classroom. Who's up next? Oh. There you go. All right, so see, I knew, I was clairvoyant. Science was next.
Well, you'll see by the science and math committees, we're a little bit more literal, so we did not change our names like every other committee, and we're a little bit more straightforward. So I apologize for no name change, but we get right to the point.
Well, science alignment, science alignment.
And Mr. Hurley did half our work. He stole our thunder. We were going to talk about informational text and lower foundational skills. But so as the science committee, and I'm going to echo what Mr. Ursulisi said, this is very teacher-driven and teacher-centered. We have representation from all buildings and all grade levels. And what the common theme was that they were hungry for a vertical articulation and also horizontal articulation within their schools and across town as well. So in discussions, what we found out, the two major important themes that we're focusing on for the science committee are those raw foundational science skills that very important to capture early on with the little ones. As a former science teacher, I know teaching, elementary and middle school, like science can be very engaging, and they're so easily influenced at that age with science. They're excited about it and hooked, and we want to maintain that hook and that engagement. So it's something in the kindergarten level as making a simple observation, the sky is blue, may seem simple, but it's so big at that level that carries them on through the skills that we want to focus on through 12th grade. So what we focus on is those, like I said, those raw inquiry-based science skills at the lower level, and also a writing process that we're focusing on through the elementary school through high school as CERs, claim, evidence, and reasoning, which is a writing strategy that allows the students to articulate these skills and their findings through their writing, because the ultimate goal we're focusing on in high school is for a Rutherford science student to be able to write a lab report. So we want to focus on these inquiry-based skills through a writing process.
And to expand on the CERs, it is the type of writing is something that we can start in kindergarten, but it also carries through to AP style writing. So, our students are going to start to learn that making a claim, what is my evidence, what's my reasoning? And, it's simple as something like, why is it warm when the sun's out? They're looking at that, but then it goes to a much higher level in AP biology. And I'm not going to even try to touch a topic there, but, that type of writing will carry on throughout. So those are a lot of what we worked on the elementary level. And then we're kind of tackling a few things on the middle to the high school level. So the first thing that we looked at on the high school level is changing our science graduation requirements. We wanted to really increase the rigor, give our students require them to take a more well-rounded science education in the high school. So that comes from taking requiring biology and chemistry, and then the third year of science that would have to be either physics, environmental science, or one of the AP classes. On the high school level, we're also going to be looking at the environmental science curriculum to really make sure that we infuse some more physics concepts and standards, so the students who choose maybe not to take physics will get exposed to those ideas and those concepts in the environmental as it pertains to the curriculum there. So we're looking at that. We are also looking at on them from 6th grade up to 8th grade of trying to look at a new program. So getting one streamlined. We're kind of a little disjointed in the way, in the materials that we're using. So what we're exploring now is trying to get a streamlined program that when students leave Pierpont School, they've used the program in 6th grade, because the way that NGSS, they write their science standards, it's middle school. So it's 6th to 8th grade. It's all middle school science standards. And we've integrated across the board 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science. So looking for a resource that can take from 6th grade, carry over to Union School, and then be used both at 7th and 8th grade to, again, to have, as everybody keeps saying, that, same experience for our students. So that's going to be the next thing we're tackling there. And what we're also looking at is kind of scaffolding our lab report writing. So where it starts in 6th grade, how we're taking, what's the style, what are we expecting, so that when they get to high school and when they get to, ideally, hopefully one of our more challenging science classes, that they have a streamlined approach where we've kind of built on it every single year. So that's going to be the next thing that we are tackling on the middle school to high school level.
Okay. So what's great is this is evolving and it's organic. So the teachers, like I said, they're very hungry for this collaboration. And one new initiative that's going for horizontal articulation is a new science fair initiative in the lower elementary schools in Lincoln and Washington, with the elementary science specialist who pushes into the classrooms and works with all the students at both schools. So in 3rd grade, starting this year, her new initiative with this science fair, where these students are going to be able to communicate their findings. And that's a skill that Mr. Ryan and I are going to talk about in 2 slides ahead of us, is the profile of the graduate. So that is one initiative for the lower elementary schools.
And then one last thing that we have just recently done is we have partnered with science coaches that are going to provide support to our mystery science program, which is used from 1st grade to 5th grade. So it's going to be communication that's primarily done via email, and these science coaches are going to provide additional informational text that we could read. In 1st grade, here's a book that aligns with when you're learning about day and night. Here's a good text that, or a book that you can read, and here are some high-level questions that can help. So this will just kind of take our elementary science to the next level and really start building on and helping, and it's really supporting our teachers to get those students to the next level. So that's where we are on the science end.
Just a quick follow-up on the science fair. It's something that, for the board's knowledge, if you're not aware, we have a science specialist who works in the 1 to 3 and sees the students, was it one time a week or?
Yep, once a week.
And then some of the science gets infused by the elementary teacher. Keep in mind, most elementary teachers, right, come with a literacy background. So what we're going to do, the science specialist initiated, right, Ms. Saxon, I think it was her idea, right, to come up with this science fair to really, use some of the things that she's bringing, maybe a higher level type of science that you might expect on the elementary level, and have a showcase for it, which again would get the kids excited and give them something to build on. The science coach program, that came out of grant money that we had, Title I money, I believe, right? And that money can be used to help, again, the elementary teachers and the upper elementary teachers who may not have the strong, science background, their elementary specialists, to really help them pick up their game a little bit with science.
About the new science fair initiative, it will be 3rd graders demonstrating their knowledge, but what the teacher is doing is she's bridging their skills that they acquire every level from kindergarten through 3rd grade, that they can communicate their findings, because and a theme with the profile of the graduate that we're going to talk about is like every experience in Rutherford, shapes the Rutherford student. So even though that they're displaying this information in 3rd grade, it's all the skills that they acquire up, which is a theme with all these committees and the profile projects.
Thanks. And the last thing, a hope is in that reorganization, the scheduling I talked about, we'll be able to get the science specialists down to the kindergarten center at least once or twice a month to start some of the science programming there, because that's not happening there at that point, okay? And now we're going to math, right? There you go.
So on the math committee, I'm going to primarily speak about the elementary level, and then Mr. DeVary will speak to a little bit more of the middle and the high school level. So we are currently using Math in Focus as our K-6 math program, and they are in the process. They had notified me at the beginning of last year that they were going to be updating everything. It was going to have to be all new materials, new platform, and it was going to be, we were starting to know that this was going to be an investment. So kind of as these committees came along, and with that in mind, it was a good time to examine, if the needs of our students and if Math in Focus was the right program for us. So what we started to do is we have, the process began last year where I had a committee of we had our elementary teachers on this math committee start to examine different programs, we looked at what other schools were doing. I examined test scores from other schools. We kind of all came back together and came up with a list of 4 or 5 different programs that that I was getting samples for. Then on our PD day, last spring when we had that June day, I had all the math specialists. So I had the RTI teacher from Washington School, the RTI teacher from Lincoln School. I had a math special ed teacher. I had the RTI teacher from Pierpont School, and we all met in one room, and we had books, and they compared lessons and similar, a similar second grade lesson and a similar fifth grade lesson. And they looked at terminology and how things were taught. And we narrowed it down to 2 different programs. And we had presenters come in, curriculum experts from these publishers come in and give presentations to talk about what the programs offer. So we're in the process, and hopefully we'll have it narrowed down very shortly, where we have moved forward with either, we've examined our 2 top programs became Math in Focus, or Envisions were the 2 top from the that came out of the committee. So we're in the process of doing that. I've presented to the principals. We're looking over the findings now. So hopefully very shortly, we'll have a decision on which way we're going to go. So that's where we are. One of the other big things that came out of the committees were vertical articulation. So I think similar to what Mr. Ursulisi was saying is that, we kind of talked about how maybe the terminology that the teacher is using in 3rd grade is a little different than the terminology that the teacher is using in 4th grade, but it's the same concept. So kind of making sure that when we have these opportunities for vertical articulation, hey, how are you teaching greatest common factor, and what terminology are you using? So we're not reinventing the wheel every year, and we're making sure that there's, I think equity is the best way across the board, that all these students are having the same experience. So from our vertical articulation, that has been essential in making sure that we're all teaching the same, that all the teachers are teaching the same standards and the same concepts, but just making sure that the methods and strategies are very similar, so that we're, keeping a streamlined approach for our students. So that's kind of where we are and what we're at. Where we're going on the elementary end is just kind of planning for those changes. And if we adopt a new program, what does that look like? What type of professional development do we need? What type of coaches? If we're, and making sure that we are prepared for any changes, even if we are making sure that the teachers have all that they need to prepare for, what's moving forward with elementary math. So that's kind of where we are on the K-6, K-8 level, and looking at our elementary math programs.
And just to follow up, I know Mr. DeBarry's coming in, but just to follow up on that, one of the reasons why I asked the board to approve the calendar change for one session, those 3 one-session days, is provide some of the time of what you're hearing in literacy and in science and in math, to give the teachers time to do this work together. In fact, we are so close to making that decision, right? We're so close, we're almost there, right, with the math program, because we're going to get some trainers in for some of these one-session days to start that process going for next year. Mr. Barrett?
So one of the early things that, we did as a math committee is we wanted to examine our NJSLA math scores. Okay. So with that, one of the first things we started to do is we asked our teachers to actually take the test, okay, to become familiar with the test, because a lot of them, they're teaching their courses, but they're really not familiar with what the test was asking. So we started with that. We asked our teachers to take the test, right? We did that together. And then we asked them to start helping.
Failed, right? Everybody passed.
We did okay. But we needed them to be familiar, because we were then going to ask them to spend some time in class on test prep. okay? Infuse some of those types of questions into the lesson, right? Because we were looking to get better at that. We asked them to take the test. We asked them to start adding it a little bit into their classes, right? And the next thing we want to do is we wanted to make sure that they had the resources that they needed, that they could do that in the class. Like, did they have the questions? Was there a bank of questions for them? So that's some of the stuff that we started to do, okay? After that, what we started to do is we started to look at the test environment. There was a time we took our test in here. I believe we had like 100 kids in here and we took the test. And through discussion, right, what we kind of figured out is that might not be the best, right? You bring 100 kids into this room, it's cold, right? They're not with their teacher, and we kind of felt like they'd be a little bit more accountable to the teacher that's spending the most time with them if we put them in a classroom, a small classroom, with their teacher. So we started with test prep, then we went to test environment. After that, the next thing that we had looked at was we wanted to look at a bunch of schools that we kind of felt were similar to us. And we wanted to see how they were testing and what their scores looked like. So we found about 17 schools that we felt were similar to us, and we got all their average scores, grade 3, right up through high school, including ours. And then we started to order, and we started to look at the scores. And what we found was, for the most part, right, grades 3 right on up, right, we were doing pretty well. We were testing pretty well. And then once we kind of got to 8th grade, right, we had this drop-off, okay? So what we found was, okay, as we started to examine the scores, we kind of felt like the same schools were always at the top, whether it was 3rd grade, 5th grade, Algebra 1, Geometry. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to see how they were doing things. How were they consistently at the top? So we reached out to a lot of schools. We had a lot of conversations with, math directors and math supervisors in different schools. And the one thing that came out of it was their sequencing was a little bit different than ours. Sequencing, is like basically how are they offering? What are they offering? What's the order? The way we've always done things here, and it worked for us for a long time, was we did pre-algebra in Math 7, Algebra 1 and Math 8, and then when they got to high school, most of the kids took geometry. Well, while we were examining this stuff, what we found was like there was a decent percentage of kids that were retaking Algebra 1 when they got here. They opted to kind of take Algebra 1 again when they got to the high school level. So we kind of found like there was like this disconnect, right? We got this drop kind of right when we hit 8th grade. We got a decent number of kids that are taking the course over again, okay? But all these schools are doing it a little bit different than us. And what they were doing is they were offering Math 7 in 7th grade, Math 8 in 8th grade, and Algebra 1 at the high school, okay? Now, their best and brightest still had a way where they could take accelerated classes, which we always did, right? And we still do. But that would allow those students, when they got to the high school, to get into the honors track and the AP track, okay? So our recommendation to to Mr. Hurley was that we mimic what those schools were doing, that we take Math 7 in 7th grade, Math 8 in 8th grade, and then when they got to high school, they could take Algebra 1 and still offer the opportunity for our best and brightest to take accelerated classes and get into the honors track when they got here, okay? After that recommendation, we needed to make sure that we could handle our schedule and our staff could handle that kind of a change, okay? If we have a large, if we have a large number of students taking Algebra 1 when they get into high school for a year, right? That means we're gonna have a small number taking geometry, right? Can our schedule handle that? Can our staff, and when I mean staff, like the number of teachers that we have, can we handle that change? So we examined that, right? And we were pretty confident that we could do that, okay? So going forward, where are we going now? We're gonna continue to look at ways, best practices for test prep, best practices for testing environment. And we're also going to start to examine the curriculum for Math 7 and Math 8 and make sure it lines up, with the New Jersey standards. Just last week, Department of Ed came out with guidance in terms of, it was kind of pinpointed for Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. So one of the things we now need to do as a committee is we have to now look at what we currently have as our curriculum and make sure that that lines up. And going forward, there might be some other committees that come out of this. Maybe there's some subgroups that we kind of feel like are underperforming, and we might want to address those concerns in that group. Okay, so that's where we're headed, and that's what we've done.
Good. You have a question? I was gonna wait, we have one more group to report. Go ahead.
Real quickly, it's back to what it used to be years ago. I mean, you took 7th grade and 8th grade, and you took.
Yeah, that's, when I left the high school, it all went south. No,
It's just like Brian's.
But no, we used to have that sequence, and quite frankly, we did better on scores. the other thing is, Ms. Schmedding mentioned math and focus, and we're looking at, and Mr. DeBarry mentioned this drop off that comes around grades 7th and 8th. So in looking at a new program, the refocused math and focus, is it stepping up because are the foundational pieces are occurring in grades 3, 4, 5, and 6, getting the kids ready for what's expected in 7, 8, 9? Maybe not. Mr. DeBarry, Ms. Schmedding mentioned, but I know also science did this, and I know, I think the literacy folks did as well. We did reach out to a lot of other schools, but we looked at schools, as they mentioned, that are demographically similar to us, but seem to be doing better than us. So why? And we looked at curriculum, we looked at methodology, we looked at programs. And again, not to just mirror them, but to be willing to look at how we could do better, right? So I think what you've heard with all the 4 academic areas is that we're taking steps in that direction. And this is not a 1-year, panacea quick fix. There's going to be trial and error. I mean, we may look at some of this stuff that we're talking about tonight. Wow, isn't this great? And next year say, it wasn't as good as we thought. We have to, recircle and revisit. But we're not going to make progress if we don't attempt to make some changes and some revisions. You guys, okay? So then the profile of the graduate, which is really going to be a multi-year project, is kind of tying a lot of this together. So Ms. Saxon and Mr. Ryan are also chairing that. If you notice, these people are, they get a lot of stuff. All these folks, they're wearing many hats. Okay. So I appreciate that.
So the profile of a Rutherford graduate stems from all this committee work. As we took a deep dive into each curriculum, we identified skills that we want our students to master. And what the profile of the Rutherford graduate is, it's kind of like a ladder climb, giving these students opportunity to demonstrate, these skills and shine, because we do wonderful stuff in this district. And I've learned about a lot of wonderful stuff we've done through this committee. We've created an advisory board, which is made up of teachers and Mr. Ryan and myself. This is a work in progress. It's going to take years to develop, but we're at a very good point right now. Dr. Alati, when you spoke virtually at the opening day meeting, you spoke about your daughter, who is a very successful musician, and what you said was that every piece of her experience in Rutherford shaped her, helped her promote her to where she is. And that's what this profile of a Rutherford graduate is that a student enters in kindergarten, and every experience and every teacher that guides them along the way till they graduate defines them as a Rutherford graduate. So this project, this initiative, is not just the senior that's graduating high school. It's the kindergarten student that's being promoted to Lincoln or Washington, and it's the Lincoln and Washington student that's being promoted to Pierpont, and it's the 4th grader within Pierpont that's being promoted to the 5th grade and the 6th grade, and so on, Union and Rutherford High School. And to whatever individualized path they take, we are preparing them, whether it's college, a technical school, or the military, or a job. But we have to provide them with the skills so they can be successful in life and beyond. So we are an advisory board, like I said, made up of teachers and a guidance counselor. And what we've done is I've identified core competencies that we believe is important to be infused in every piece of curriculum in the district, and sub-competencies as well. That's where we're at that point where we have completed that identification with community input, with feedback from Mr. Hurley's PTA meetings, with staff input. We've sent out Google surveys with staff input of what skills they feel is important for their students to enter in their grade level and exit. And our advisory board is now going to be collecting student input, student data. They will be going back to their buildings and collecting input from students. So that's where we're at right now. The end result will be these capstone projects that at every level, where students will be able to demonstrate the wonderful things they do and the skills that they've acquired to be promoted to the next level. That's at the end, but right now we're working on the skills, we're getting all the feedback, we're working on advertisement and logo, which Mr. Ryan is going to jump in and talk about that.
So last week we met with the advisory board and Mr. Hurley, and we started working on our logo, kind of our brand. How's this going to look? And, and part of that brand is how we're going to roll this out and what we're going to look like. How we're going to advertise this. And we want this to be everywhere. It's going to be something that people, when they think of Rutherford, they're going to think of profile of a Rutherford graduate, and that brand will signify that. So that's going to be coming. We're looking forward to presenting that to you once we have an idea and where we're going with that. But we're working on that next in February, March. We're also looking at these projects. And as Mr. Hurley mentioned, we went with Dr. Murphy from former superintendent in Ramsey. And Ramsey kind of, when we talked to the other schools, and Ramsey's kind of cornered the market on the profile of a Ramsey graduate. So he kind of gave us some, sound advice today when we met with him regarding timeline. We thought we were going to be done at the end of this year. What he kind of enlightened us to is the fact that this might be another three years by the time it's fully implemented. That we're on the right track with our competencies, with our logo, and he said to really take the time with the capstone projects, and then with the competencies, also looking at embedding rubrics with those competencies in each grade level into our curriculum. Really planting these deeper roots of this, so it is lasting. And we have this blueprint, so we can refer to parents and say, this is where your child will end up. These 6 competencies, this is what we're really driving home every step of the way where your child will be. And as we have this, we're going to share these with you, and we are going to plan a big rollout for kind of like a soft rollout at the end of the year, and then we want to start that next year really bringing this in September. And then moving forward with our advisory board and expanding however we need to in regards to the capstone projects. So that's where we are right now.
And we've engaged our public relations folks to help us with the logo and the development of that. Dr. Murphy's comments today, now I'm going to work till I'm 92 because it's going to take another 3 to 5 years to get this done. But, we were probably thinking we were going to get done with this too quickly. And we're still going to, the logo is going to be out there, the rollout's going to be out there, but we're going to work then on how to infuse, right, these competencies to make sure they are in the curriculum as we go through. And then the projects will, I think Ms. Saxon used the word for organically, right? They'll kind of organically come from those competencies that are in the curriculum. So it might be a 3-year project to get to the finish line, but we'll all be wearing the brand shirt next year, okay? That's going to be out there. We're going to get it going. And I think when you hear, I know, this is a lot that we're throwing out there, but not anywhere, it's kind of the tip of the iceberg, what we've been talking about. But everything that you heard from these committees is there, it's like almost concentrically circles with where the profile of the graduate. This is what it's really tying it all together, right? It's all kind of working together in these different, and that's why we're going to spread out to other academic areas, other co-curricular areas, as we go through the next couple of years. So, reports are finished. I know first of all, I want to thank the folks who are chairing and the teachers, the 50+ people who are working and still working on this. Everybody was kind of volunteered for this. Ms. Fensick is a member of the committee in the back. She's a committee member. I sent an invitation out. We tried to pick folks to come on in, and I had 50 teachers come up to the courtroom. And, I thought that would be intimidating, courtroom. And we said, you want to be a part of this process. And just about every one of them agreed, stayed on. And then we even had people who volunteered, hey, I heard about these committees. Do you need another member? Can we come on board? So it's really been a great project in the sense of engaging faculty, administrators, supervisors to work together. And like I think several of the committees said, it's not a top-down, it's coming from them. And then throughout the year, either committee chairs have been coming to administrative council meetings to present certain items to the administration. It's really been, I think, a really good process that I want to see continue. I think some of the gain has been an intrinsic one, not just the infusion of real stuff that you see, but the conversations and the thought processes that are going on with people in the buildings because we've generated these conversations. So I appreciate your work. I appreciate you joining us tonight. I know it's a long day for everyone, and you're here, so we appreciate that. So before we move on, Dr. Lottie, do you or any of the board members have anything you want to
Yeah, I want to just start by saying that Mr. Hurley's been talking about these committees now for a little bit, and I realize why he's been so energized and jazzed just hearing your presentations. And I could say I've heard a lot of sort of curricular presentations professionally, and this one was quite awesome. And I appreciate how all the committees move toward thinking about alignment. And, you know, the vertical alignment, I also heard a little bit of horizontal alignment with, you know, how does literacy factor into science and things like that. And I love that you're tying in the profile of a graduate into this work because you're talking so much about skills and proficiencies. So I think it's a great tie into that. And we just did our board self-evaluation, and one of the things that is a question that board members have to answer is what is a major challenge facing our district? And I think one of the things we put on there was sort of the restructuring and evaluation that you're all doing. And we see that as a challenge and a priority. And I think I'll just speak for myself, I think we're in great hands with all of the amazing work you're doing. School change is not easy, and it takes, you know, trust that you have to have with faculty and staff for sure. So obviously there's a lot of that going on, and the bottom-up approach, I'm sure, is valued and appreciated. So I did have a couple of questions that, if it's okay, just to ask. One was just, so you referred to common language and sort of common language around assessments and grading and things like that. And it definitely is an important way to go, and it is of critical importance, but it's often very hard to implement and hard to assess. That you know, teachers and grades are using sort of the common language. So, you know, do you have any thoughts about how you want to sort of benchmark that common language is being used? Like, is it being developed with you in collaboration with teachers? And so how do you assess over time that they're consistently using that common language?
I think first and foremost, it's finding that common language that we're going to be looking at. And so that's again, the committees, going through the committees, talking to the teachers, talking to the administrators in the building, and finding that common language and articulating it horizontally and vertically. So that is the plan. In terms of benchmarks, of course, you know, that common language, like we said with the profile, we're also looking at, you know, increasing sense of rubrics that are common and the common language within the competencies and rubrics, so that will be implemented as well. So that's a work in progress. So it's a good point what you're saying, the benchmarks, how are we going to judge that and monitor that is something that we have to look at. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I feel like you already know what the profile of the Rutherford graduate is. You're just holding out for like another couple months till you get the branding down. I have this feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah, we gotta keep you tuned in. Marissa?
You can shout, we can hear you.
I was just going to say the time that we're getting to for these, I don't want to call it a half day, but the vertical articulation days is a great.
One session days.
One session days is a great way when we get all these teachers together for the vertical articulation to talk about, okay, here is the common language, here are the rubrics, and then kind of bouncing off of each other of how they're implementing it, problems that they're running into, things that are working well. So that time is I find, to be very valuable. One thing I want to say too, talking about common language and science being a part with the CERs, it's something that we even started to adopt when we were talking in social studies. We were using a method called ACE, but it's the exact same thing. Right. And we said, well, what's the point of having two separate things that are doing the exact same thing? So that's just another example.
And the new literacy standards essentially talk about CERs.
Right.
So,
and that's AP,
so it's
AP as well.
So we started this coming from science, right? But then we're looking at what is claims, evidence, reasoning. I mean, any report that you write should have those components. So, you know, it really, and I think, Brian, you started with the language arts teachers coming up with writing terms, right? And you made a list. So now it's just the teachers come up with a list, you discuss it, and we all agree, like you made the comment, a thesis, we're going to call it a thesis statement, or we're going to call it what are we going to call it? And let's use it throughout. I mean, every profession, right, has jargon, has language that we use. So, you know, we just need, we need independent and creative critical thinkers in the classroom, but we don't need independent agents who think they could do things that, you know, the teacher across the hall is not doing, because then it creates problems for that student.
In the case of the new literacy standards will inform a lot of the common language because these are a significant departure from the old English language arts standards. And I also think when we do have these professional development days, you work backwards. We all know understanding by design. What's your end product? We're going to look at the rubric. What does the rubric say? Well, that's going to inform some of this common language as well.
No, that's fantastic. So a lot of what you're talking about is some potential programmatic changes or curricular changes that might be new programs or whatnot. So I'm wondering where technology sort of falls into this. Do you see there being a need for different types of technology that supports some of these curriculum changes? Do you see sort of the use of technology sort of changing as some of these things are implemented? Or is it too early days?
No, that's, well, in terms of math, all of the programs that are out there now all have technological components. They all have test prep questions on a platform. Now, what grade level we start that in, that probably won't start till around 3rd grade, when we're getting the students on the Chromebooks and actually logging into a platform and answering these types of questions. So both the programs that we were looking at do have that component where they can get on the computer and they are using that. In all the elementary schools, they have all the new Sharp panels that are very interactive, and that will support what the teachers do when they project their lessons, when they use these interactive panels. I think all these programs, as they're updating and adapting to the new new technology, they do have their characters are a little bit more interactive. The videos they project, the lessons are much more interactive. So the teachers using these new panels and getting the students on the Chromebook, it is all prepared, and we do have everything that we need for any program changes.
Right. I think if your question's in line with either a a budgetary or I don't see that being a major issue. I mean, look, when you're buying a program, the math program is going to be expensive, right? The science program is going to be, but so are textbooks. So, but it's not like we need, more computers or different types of computers or more bandwidth or, we have what we need. It's just utilizing it now differently.
Awesome. Questions from board members? All right, so Mr. Conti?
Yeah, I had a question about the benchmarks that you talked about. Is that, obviously we started using the benchmarks. What's been the feedback from that? Good, bad, ugly?
So we use the benchmarks at the high school, and some of them are project-based, some of them are assessments, but they only take place within that 56-minute block, right? So some of the feedback, like Mr. Ursulisi said, kids are going off to college and coming back and saying, well, I'm sitting for a 3-hour final exam and I have no experience doing that. We're sitting for a 90-minute block of a state assessment 4 times, and we're not used to sitting for that. So we kind of chunked it out too much, I think, essentially. So we're trying to go back to more stamina, more rigor, and also, again, more with common language. So every student in Algebra 1, no matter the teacher, every student in U.S. History 2, they're all going to take the same assessment. So every teacher, again, we started, what do we want them to learn? We work backwards. So they all have this experience of sitting and taking a longer assessment, having the stamina to sit. The SAT is just redesigned, and it's certainly shorter, but it's still 3 hours. The student still has to sit for a 3-hour exam. So, we're trying to put our students in a position to be more successful in these situations, whether it's now or whether it's in the future. They sit for a CPA exam, they want to go off to get a master's degree, go to medical school, law school. They're going to have to sit for longer periods of time and be responsible for a large amount of information. So it's going to be a little more standardized, essentially. Yeah, good.
All right. Go Mr. Sprayberry.
So, and the world I live in, AI and ChatGPT is, we're encouraging our, people to use it daily to help them in their work, everything else. So, we see it in education, at this grade level, and what everything includes as far as colleges and stuff like that. our students from, it's a broad question, but it's massively out there.
I think we have to teach them how to use it. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think the analogy I often give is, I would imagine many, many years ago, there were math teachers who were very upset that the calculator was invented. And in the old days, the correct answer was enough in a math class. But then it became, well, now I can just get the correct answer. So the math teachers adapted, and it was explain your work. English teachers, we need to adapt. Any literacy, any sort of writing component needs to adapt. And we can't ban it. We can't say you can't use it. I think the proper way to go about it is teaching the proper use of ChatGPT, of any of them, of Bard, of any of them, whether it's for literacy, whether it's for graphic arts, whether it's for video creation. The idea that it does exist and this is how we can best utilize it. And the questions come up on a daily basis. I had an 8th grade teacher email me the other day. She was able to go back in the history of the Google Doc. The child had done everything in class. And that's one of the ways teachers try to, get around this is we're going to do it all in class. And she did. She typed everything in her Google Doc, and then she fed her whole piece into ChatGPT and said, make me sound smarter. It's literally what she wrote. Copied, pasted her essay and said, make this sound smarter. And then she put it into the Google Doc. Now, her mistake was not creating a new Google Doc where we couldn't go back and see her history. But the teacher said, what do I do? Is it plagiarism? I don't think you punish a kid for that, especially in 7th or 8th grade. I think you have the conversation with them. Well, how did it make your words better? Or did it? Did it change what you were trying to say? Did it change your voice? These are all conversations we're going to have. And I know Mr. Ryan talked about that on the Academic Alignment Committee. It's either going to be a very big subcommittee or a committee of its own. Where do we go? How do we teach our kids to use it? Because it is being used.
Yeah, I think we're at the very beginning of this, right? And a lot is evolving. Like, how we should, I think the sky is falling that we heard a year and a half ago.
And that was me. I was freaking out.
I didn't want to say that.
I went into Mr. Morano's office and I was like, shut it down.
Mr. Morano called me. I had to come over and do a little counseling with you. And we took a walk around the block, and I had my Louisville Slugger and everything. But the sky hasn't fallen, with it. It really hasn't.
No.
And you mentioned, I can tell you when I was in Mr. Ursulisi's position as a supervisor of language arts, and as again, I don't want to date myself, but you all know how old I am. I remember sitting in a conversation with the supervisor and the principal that we should not allow the internet into school because kids were going to be able to get anything they want. Nobody's going to think anymore. We just should not have the internet in school. Okay. And, now we couldn't function for 2 minutes without it. Right. So, we can't let the technology control us. We have to learn how to manage it, work with it. I think the key word about conversations with kids, when I was teaching writing, even up until 10 years ago, when I was still teaching at Burn Community College writing, I never did that plagiarism, what's it called? You put it in and it could tell you. I never did that because, I knew how my students could write. And if I thought something sounded like they plagiarized, I'd have a conversation with them and let them explain to me what they wrote. So I think, we're going to have growing pains with this. I'm going down to Texpo this week, which is the state's big technology thing. And I'm going to attend, there's like 4 or 5 workshops I'll have time to go to. And every one of them is going to be on AI.
The reason I asked that question is we're involved in Expo, so we'll be down there as well. My closing remarks to you guys is the passion, the energy. We need more of this because we had to listen to all of this from Jack.
Well, listen, we talked about 15 to 20 minutes, but see, they've all been mentored by me. So their idea of 20 minutes is really like, an hour and a half. Right.
Mr. Mazzone?
I have no questions, just a comment. Thank you. I know it's late. We appreciate you being here. This is the best board meeting I've attended in a long time. And I sincerely mean that. By the graduate, they never clap for me, so.
We were clapping for them, not you.
We're not
You know-
clapping for you. But sincerely, I just made some notes while you all were speaking. The testing stamina in literacy, teaching MLA versus APA. I taught undergrad. Painful to have undergrad students who don't know the difference. So again, thank you very much for that. I think that's huge. Best practices, data, consistent terminology. It's just super exciting, to sit here. All these times Mr. Metz sits here with us and records these meetings, and I go, good God, who's going to watch our board meeting? But I actually am going to tell people to watch the board meeting because I think there's a lot of good stuff here that parents should be hearing, the great work that you're doing, the grassroots. I just, if we can help, if I can help, we're happy to do it because, I have a Rutherford graduate, I have 2 on the way, and I think it's important to take time with the portrait of a Rutherford graduate. I, for one, don't want it to be a tagline. I want it to have some real meat on the bone. I think that's really substantial for all of our children. So thank you.
Now we'll applaud you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're good.
Any other comments? Dr. Racine?
2 things. One, echo what everybody else said, definitely, that's 10, right? But seeing this as a grassroots effort, that people are involved and want to be more involved, right, speaks a lot to our faculty and staff, I think.
Yes.
And that's awesome. People think, let me do more work, which you don't hear. Yeah. Also, seeing science and math so prominently displayed warms my heart a bit. Someone who's read a lot of horrible lab reports in my life, you should have done this a long time ago. Yeah.
Mr. Ely?
Yeah, again, agree with everything that's been said, and thank you. But your enthusiasm, your teachers' enthusiasm, it's contagious, as you can see. So great job. Thank you, Mr. Hurley. Thank you.
So we're looking for more excitement in our board meetings, obviously.
Well, we could arrange like the old Giant Crosser. I could arrange guest hosts coming in for me. There's a good Monday night game. I could have somebody fill in. It'd be exciting.
Any other comments?
I just want to say I'm just glad you guys are focusing on vertical alignment because as a teacher and also as a parent, it's good that all the teachers are on the same page. Just from a parent perspective, if you've had a child in Lincoln School and Washington School and you're saying, well, how are your kids learning math? And there's different types of, verbiage that they're using and different strategies. I think it has to be on the same page. And even when you're going to different districts, make sure that everybody is on using the same vertical alignment as well. So, and to have 50 members of the staff, volunteer to be on these committees speaks volumes. So continue the great work.
Any other comments? Ms. Jones?
You were absolutely excellent. I don't know what I was expecting, but you far exceeded my expectations. It was really wonderful. And I know you all, well, it's just great to see you all in action.
Awesome. Well, Mr. Bogosian, you're the only one left.
Ditto.
I want to get them home.
Ditto. Mr. Conti. Mr. Conti, do you have
The only thing I
comments?
wanted to say is, we see all these test results every year that get presented to us. And every year, we saw the math, the dip in the math. So it was really great to see okay, there's a plan on how we're going to address this. It's things that we've asked Jack and he's given us the overview, but to hear it from you guys has been really fantastic. So, which is really encouraging. So thank you for everything and all the hard work that you've done and you are doing.
And yeah, so I think you've sort of heard and seen that we're really thankful for your being here this evening. We look forward to future reports. You're obviously invited anytime to come and report back. And although it's not on the agenda tonight, it was on the agenda last time whenever we have to look at retirements or resignations. So I just want to say, Dr. Hopkins, since you're here, how much you're going to be missed, and want to just really thank you for everything. And hopefully your ears were ringing at the last meeting because you've had a great impact on the district. So since you're here, just figured we would say that and also express appreciation for you.
Thank you for all you've done. Thank you.
All right, unless there are any other questions, I think we're going to thank everyone who's here. And like we always like to say, you're welcome to stay for the rest of the evening. But if you have homework or other things you need to do, this is a good time.
I'll fill you in tomorrow.
We wanted to thank all of you for your support. This is, Rutherford is a very unique place where we have a board who really supports us. And so not to make this 100% a love fest, but we appreciate your appreciation, but we also appreciate all of you. So it's a really good combination of what we have here. It's a great place to work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, so we are going to move now to the report of the superintendent for, I see there is a fall 2023 NJGPA report of student achievement that he'll go over.
Yeah, this will be brief. I believe you all got it in your packet. As you know, the students are required grade 11 students are required to take a graduation proficiency assessment. Then in grade 12, in the fall of their grade 12, any student who was not enrolled in the school or didn't take the test somewhere in the state in their 11th grade, or anyone who did not pass the test, can take the test again. Okay, so this report is simply those students who had to retake the test or take it for the first time because they weren't in school in New Jersey the year before. Okay, we had a total of 12 students take the test in language arts. We had a total of 35 students take the test in math. And page 4 indicates to you that of the students who took the language arts test, those 12, 58.3 were graduation ready, which meant 7 of them passed it the second time around. 41 were not graduation ready, 41%. 5 students did not pass it the second time around. In math, 20% were graduation ready, 7 students, 21 did not pass it the second time. That's 80%. You'll see that we did better by a significant margin in language arts than the state did, and by a less significant, but nonetheless, we did better than the state did in math. What do those students who did not pass the second time around? They have an option of one of 2 things. There's another test that they can substitute, like SAT, for example, is one of the tests, or they can do a portfolio. Most students do the portfolio. It gets worked on with their teacher, with Dr. Hopkins, gets presented to the state. We review it. If we approve it, the state then gets it, and they then either approve it or reject it. You'll know that there's so many reports I give every year. One of the reports I also give is how students graduate, and I'll say at a certain point, X number did it through the test, X number did it through another fashion. Those are the kids every year that do portfolios. These numbers are relatively consistent with what we've had every year in terms of the students. So again, it's not a large number of our students. It's not one of the major bits of data that we use, right? But nonetheless, it's important for you to be aware of it, for me to report it, and for us to work on it in terms of our self-assessments. And like in all the reports that I give to you, there are interventions listed in the report. There are subgroups listed in the report. In many cases, you'll see the subgroups are not there because if you don't have a number of 10, they don't get reported because you don't want to identify students. So as a brief report, if anybody has any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Questions or comments?
And based on the time and the length of our other reports, I'll make a few comments on items in the agenda when we get to those items in the agenda. Okay.
Yep, sounds good. Any questions or comments on Mr. Hurley's report? All right, hearing none, we're going to go on to the report of the president. So I am just going to focus on our board self-evaluation. So every year, at the end of the calendar year, we undertake a board self-evaluation. We've had 100% participation and really appreciate board members taking the time to participate and give open, honest feedback. As a strong board, I think our goal is always to improve and to get better. So the way that the board evaluation is structured is really into 2 parts. We evaluate ourselves as a board of a whole, which is as an entity that works together, makes decisions together, plans things strategically together. And then also we look at our individual performance and contributions. I think that the evaluation reflects that we are a strong board that really appreciates and enjoys the work. I think in looking at this year, our most effective areas as a board of a whole were in preparation, ethical behavior, working effectively with the superintendent, and engagement with the CSA evaluation. I think community engagement is an area that scores lower, but it's all relative. It still gets a pretty good score, but I think it's an area we continue to talk about in terms of how we can continue to have effective and active community engagement. And I appreciate that it's part of our board goals, that aspect that we continue to look at. In terms of our individual performance and contributions, I think our highest scores were very similar to the board as a whole. In terms of a score, again, it's all relative. We scored well on it, but finance was a little bit lower than some of the other areas. So just continuing to have our own understanding of financing, whether it's budget planning or strategic financial planning, are always things we can continue to brush up on. This all correlates with targets for improvement that are listed on our board report, on the evaluation, from community engagement to how we can continue to leverage social media resources. And I think we even talked about communication from different departments about work progress reviews. So tonight really, I think, exceeds that expectation. Continuing professional development, association meetings, and really continued review of student achievement related to district and board goals, which is clearly a work in progress that we heard this evening. I think our board continues to be an effective and very seasoned board. We're looking for board leadership roles, so that's always good to be thinking about in terms of how we're representing the district. Continued 100% participation in RHS graduation. That was my favorite comment that was listed there. I was very proud to have everyone together for that. And I think continuing to cross-pollinate in terms of our understanding around committees. So any opportunities to gain a better understanding of committees, so we can continue to look at that. But this board self-evaluation, it's important that we go over it, have any discussion in open session. So you've had the report to be able to review. So any comments, thoughts, reflections, questions on the board self-evaluation? Mr. Mazzone.
So give out the compliments of that, I guess. But I do want to thank you for all your effort in compiling the data, all of our responses into the report. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing I try to do is I look at the previous year or two, so I'd really try to compare where were we a year ago, where are we now, are we continuing to grow in certain areas, are the comments the same in terms of how we see strengths, areas for growth?
Is the evaluation something that is made public? I mean, obviously, we talked about it in a public session, but can the public see what the questions were and stuff like that at all?
I don't know if, I don't think there's a, I mean, in the newsletter, Dr. Alati wrote a piece, says, the newsletter is going to be coming out in a week or so.
Yeah, so the focus of the bulletin newsletter was that I wrote up was on board self-evaluation. So I actually list out all the categories that are there. And then I gave sort of a high level of where we sort of assess our strengths and areas for growth, but I think did in a way that'll be well received and informative. And
So I think that's something, I mean, we talked about it in a public session, but I think that's something that the community should be more aware of, that this is something that we do.
yeah, yeah. So that's the whole topic of what is in there.
Awesome.
Mrs. Burberry.
Biggest struggle I think for the board of the evaluation is no problem. There's not much. We're fine. We're just a well-oiled machine. Outside of Jack Longman speeches. I mean, realistically, it's just nothing. I mean, it's hard. As I said in your next session today, when your things are going well, you got to dig deeper and deeper and deeper. It's just, so which is good. It's a great compliment for the years about so many other boards, so much of other just stuff out there.
I just want to say, I'm very happy. I'm always the one who's being called long-winded, so I'm okay with that break this evening.
I'll say one thing about the board and dealing with, all my colleagues around the county, and you don't realize, I think, how strong of a board you have because you function the way a board is supposed to function. And one of the things I'll just throw out there, it's kind of the history of this community. If you go back to 1972, 52 years ago, there have been 3 high school principals in 52 years. There's been 5 superintendents in 52 years. There are communities where there's been 3 or 4 or 5 high school principals in the last 9 years, or superintendents every 2 years. People come here and they stay here and they work hard here because it starts with the community. You get it right. The board gets it right. And I think that's something to keep in mind. There's no greater testament. You don't see people jumping ship. We have people leave sometimes because they're going for a better opportunity. There's only one principal position in a building. They don't get it. They may want to go. Okay, that's understandable. But you don't see people jumping ship because of the way the community works together. And I think that the board has a major role in that, a bigger role than I think you even understand. So I think your self-evaluation, which Dr. Alati just shared with me, I think reflects the strength of the board, and I think it also reflects honesty that you're willing to address the strength, and also points out some areas where you could do better. But you know what? Even those areas, like you were saying, are pretty high marks. So I appreciate all that you do.
Dr. Singh?
Similar is that, it's easy for somebody on the outside to look and say, oh, you're grading yourselves, of course will be high. I think we're a little, we're actually going through trying to be hard on ourselves. It's hard to find a place to do this. But we do look for where are we the lowest and let's raise it up. So I think that's the important part of this, is to see where, not just, hey, we're doing good, pat in the back, but where do we need to do some work? And it's differential part is the communication, because that's hard. That's really hard.
Right. But, the area of communication, again, it's not necessarily board communication, right? It's communication about the district that the board helps to manage. Well, we've gone from 2 mailers that went out to 4 electronic newsletters going to everybody, plus the 2 mailers, plus the social media posts. That's an awful lot of communication. So, we video record all this stuff, and according to Mr. Maison, our ratings are going up this week because of our guests. So, I think you're doing an outstanding job in trying to address these things.
I appreciate too that even though our goal setting is not month-wise aligned with the end of this, and then all of a sudden we have board goals, I think that we're really doing a better job of being really intentional. I know Mr. Conti talked about this in the strategic planning committee, of really trying to align board goals with our board self-evaluation. So there is a real alignment, and I think that's important too, that when we do our board goals, that we're looking at this as well, and we can use this as a tool to inform goals. Other comments or questions? All right, hearing none, then at 8:29 p.m., we are going to open the meeting to the public for anything related to the board agenda. Have any comments? All right, seeing none, at 8:29 p.m., we are going to close the meeting to the public, and we are going to move on to new business where there is action to be taken. We are going to start off with personnel, and I want to congratulate Mrs. Cole on being the chair of personnel for 2024. So please take us through it.
Hello. There are 13 motions to be put forward tonight. Number 1 is to accept the retirement of our business administrator and board secretary, Joe Kelly.
Do we have to accept that?
Let's wait for discussion now. Give it a minute.
It's all great if you don't. I'm leaving now.
Number 2, to accept the retirement of Bill Mulcahy, principal of Washington School, with regret. Number 3, to approve the retirement of Louise Hetzel from Union School with regret. Number 4, approve the retirement of Kathleen Regan, the custodian at Union Middle School with regret. And number 5, to accept the resignation of Darlene Monticello as coordinator for the Bulldog aftercare. Number 6 is a termination due to discontinuation of the position. Number 7 is to approve a part-time teacher assistant at Lincoln School. Number 8 is to approve a lunch monitor at Pierpont School. Number 9, to approve a disability leave. Number 10, to approve the internship clinical placements. There are 2 there. To approve 2 substitute teachers. To approve 2 substitute teacher assistants. And number 3 is to approve the following travel reimbursements as listed.
All right, so those are the 13. All right, I'm just going to kick it off real quick before everyone else chimes in. Just starting with Mr. Mulcahy. Obviously, he's been in the district so many years and has had a huge impact on Washington schools. So just want to say publicly, really acknowledging and thanking him for his leadership over the years. Mr. Kelly, you're a tough one. No, I don't mean you're difficult. I mean, but you know, listen, I've been on the board not as long as at least half of you, if not more than half of you, but I will say that you can really come to respect and appreciate the level of expertise and knowledge and being able to answer questions and just knowing that you're thinking strategically and there are so many moving parts to what you do, and the fact that you've done it so seamlessly. And if you don't know the answer to something, you're humble enough to be able to say, I'll figure that out and get back to you. And then you do about 20 minutes before we think you're going to. And you just, you make time for questions and everything that really needs to get done. And I have also just had the pleasure of watching you and Mr. Hurley work very closely together. And oftentimes research shows, effective districts really have to have a very close partnership. Where you're working hand in hand with each other, and just seeing how well the two of you have worked well together. I think that has also shown itself in terms of the success that the district's had. So I just want to say thank you, Mr. Kelly, for everything you've contributed. And although I'm sure we're sad, also want to congratulate you and celebrate you for all of your great accomplishments. And I'm sure we'll find very creative and innovative ways to do that in the coming months.
Thank you very much. It's been an honor and a privilege, and I've enjoyed this very much. It's the best move I ever made, was coming to Rutherford. So thank you all.
Mr. Sprayberry?
Well, I told him the day he resigned, I'm with him. He told me I couldn't.
I told him. I said, I know where you live. You can't.
Getting sent with you for years through the projects and stuff. Boyer change and all the stuff there. Just all the sessions and the conversations back and forth, change orders, true ultimate professional, wonderful to work with you, especially from the last standpoint. Just wonderful individuals. It's an honor to be serving on board with you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Mr. Healy, and then Dr. Racine.
Well, I would just like to say, when we say with regret, we mean it. Getting through a major referendum and a pandemic just about the same time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Racine.
That you've put it through a bunch of really hard times, and the way you've done this was great. We are saying that I was very proud that we have never had to cut a program due to the budget, and that's because of you. I mean, finding ways it's not easy making this budget work. It's not easy.
Well, thank you. It's a group effort, including this group. So.
Thank you. Oh, also, Christina, you're chair for the first time, and we have all people leaving.
Yeah.
Chair for a month.
I blame Charlie Ryan coming up to the board office. That's when he came up.
Council review, so there's a lot of teacher together, coach together, athletic director, assistant principal. They had administrative positions. They had athletic director of high school, middle school assistant principal, came to the principal, which is unique. Right. He was a business. He was a business. And of course, Mr. Keller, everything you all said was accurate in that, so I'll have opportunity between now and then to say more. You know, it is remarkable how we get the budget and how we manage all these programs and these initiatives. He has a lot of creative ideas. He's also open to a lot of different ideas. So this year we have about 13 people working.
I anticipated some of these, but not all of them. And so the end of the year dinners, I think it's going to go on for about a month. We're going to hold it in Madison Square Garden. We have a lot of people retiring this year. So, but we have time, you know, between now and the end of the academic year. But again, thank you, Joe, for everything you've done for the district and for me personally and for the board. I also want to make one correction. Item number 8, the lunch monitor should be 2.5 hours a day. So Joe, if you could reflect that for the minutes, it's 2.5. And that's all I have on personnel.
All right, Mrs. Cole, do you want to move those 13 items?
Yes. I'd like to move motions 1 to 13.
All right, do we have a second? Mr. Conti, any last questions or comments? Hearing none, Mr. Kelly, please take roll.
Mr. Bogosian?
Yes.
Mrs. Cole?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone?
Yes.
Dr. Racine?
Yes.
Mr. Sprayberry?
Reluctantly, yes.
Dr. Owadi?
Yes.
Motion's carried. Thank you very much.
All right, we're going to move on now to curriculum and instruction. Ms. Jones?
Yes, thank you. We did not have a CNI meeting, and tonight there are 6 motions put forth by the superintendent. 1, uniform memorandum of agreement, which is between the Rutherford Board of Education and the Rutherford Police Department. 2, out-of-district placements, which are attached. 3 and 4 are overnight trips. And 5 and 6 are HIB decisions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Jones. And I know Ms. Cole is new, so maybe just a quick high
Yeah,
level
the Uniform Memorandum of Agreement is an annual agreement that every school district in the state has to sign off with their local municipal, or in some cases, the county or regional police. It is developed by the state. We don't have any option to add or delete to it. It simply designates and what's in law about when the police have to be notified. For example, as an example, if there's a weapon in school, if there's a threat made, there's certain things that you have to notify the police. There are certain things that it tells you could notify the police. It spells out protocol if and when the police come into a situation of what their responsibilities are vis-a-vis what the school authorities are. It just spells out in one document all the legalities among police involvement in the school. Like I said, there's no discretion on any district's part. It's an annual memorandum, usually done in August. This year, because the state was slow in getting everything out, they didn't get it out to us until late December. But that was simply because they're late in getting things out. So and what I do every year is I send a copy to Chief Russo. If there are any slight revisions that are in because of law, he reviews it, I review, we meet, because we have to meet on it, and then he signs off on it, I sign off on it, the board approves it, and we're done. Okay?
And it's like, what, 80 pages?
About 80 pages, yeah. But no surprises is what we've been operating with for 25, 30 years, with some changes as, terminology changes or different things come into play, it changes.
All right.
My question already? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I got a nod from someone. The dates are right, and they're for 2023 school year, that came in late.
Good question, but I probably should say 20.
Is it for this year?
Yeah, 23, 24, yes.
Right, it came in late, okay.
It's for this year. It came late.
So what happens if when there was none yet? Practically doesn't matter.
It's all in law, it's all in code. So even if we didn't have this, we would have to. This is just a way of saying, I understand what the rules are. I'll give you an example, okay? As we're getting some new administrators, I sent them a copy of the page about when you have to call the police, right? I'm assuming they all know, but you got somebody who's relatively new, maybe they don't know, So this stuff, the protocol doesn't change. This is just a codification of it, okay?
All right. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, Ms. Jones, you want to move those?
I move resolutions 1 through 6 under curriculum and instruction.
All right, do we have a second? Mr. Healy, any last questions or comments? Hearing none, Mr. Kelly, please take roll.
Mr. Bogosian?
Yes.
Mrs. Cole?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone?
Yes.
Dr. Racine?
Yes.
Mr. Sprayberry? Dr. Awadi?
Yes.
Motion's carried. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to finance now. Mr. Bogosian.
Yes, on Monday, January 8th, we had a finance committee meeting. In attendance were myself, Mr. Healy, Dr. Racine, Mr. Kelly, and Mr. Hurley. Minutes were included in your packet. We reviewed the 2024-25 budget drivers, breakage, and the audit that was presented tonight. Tonight, we have 6 motions to consider. Motion number 1 is the routine approval of bills. Number 2 is the December treasurer's report. Number 3 is the budget line transfers. 4 is to accept the 2022-23 school year audit, including acknowledgement of 1 audit recommendation. Number 5 is awarding the contract for the attorney of record for the 24 calendar year to Fogarty and Hara. And number 6 is to authorize the submission of an amended IDEA application.
All right, thank you. Mr. Kelly or Mr. Hurley, you want to talk a little bit about number 4?
Well, Joe, I think what we said earlier holds. I was very happy with both the new auditors. I was very happy that once again we had a virtually clean audit report. And I think the credit goes primarily to Mr. Kelly and his staff, but obviously, some of the folks you saw here tonight, building principals, the director of athletics, the director of special services, all those folks have a hand in the budget process, and obviously the board and the board's finance committee. So it is a good place to be when you get good audit reports, and financially you're in good shape. All right, Frank, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, it's definitely a team effort, and my department was very active in this, and the single out, since she happens to be here, is Tamara Lee, who's my assistant, sitting out in the audience there. And she started here last March. And she took the
Thank you for being here tonight. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, Mr. Bogosian, you want to move those?
I'd like to move motions 1 through 6 under finance.
All right, second. Proceeding. Any last questions or comments? Hearing none, Mr. Kelly, please take roll.
Mr. Bogosian?
Yes.
Mrs. Cole?
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Mr. Healy? Yes. Mrs. Jones? Yes. Mr. Mazzone?
Yes.
Dr. Racine? Yes. Mr. Sprayberg?
Yes.
Dr. Awadi? Yes. Motion's carried. Thank you. All right, thank you. We'll move on now to policy. Mr. Healy?
We did not have a committee meeting. We did correspond with Mr. Rowe. We do, and submitted questions, responses. This policy regulation being published, which is policy, and there are 3 revisions in the policy. Graduation advises course requirements in science. These 2 regulations, the first one, 2624, is a grading system, which is a midterm grading system. And regulation 3027, which tables midterms, and has midterms, so that's the point. So there's one resolution.
Yeah, I just want to comment. I think that Richie is really. That was already published. That was the program that I'm student year. So that was already published. So we don't need to publish it. And as far as what Mr. Healy said, these policies are minor adjustments that correlate to each other. Science requirements for graduation, the change in grading, and placement level that will be in the return of final exams next year. All right, any other questions or comments? Mr. Stewart.
So I'm going to bring up what I'm bringing up. So I'm wondering about gap year. Is there a gap year in New Jersey or not? It's in 8 and 9.
Well, depends on if you go to private school.
The public school is very good. But they got
Not the minor.
They got 7 circle, 6th grade, and started like
You need to still be retained?
no, it is their law in New Jersey.
Not the.
Yeah, that was like
First day, and they take time off.
They travel Europe in backpack or something? Like, what?
I think we're happy in school until you're 16 years old, right?
It's something.
It's
On
okay.
the other end, after graduation, there's some.
Yeah, I see nothing in middle school.
Yeah, that's wishful, that's not wishful.
Reclassing?
Yeah, but that's in private schools, and that's not, want to be honest, that's not because they get a kid in there who they want to be their starting quarterback. But he's not going to be ready yet, so they reclass him. He repeats 8th grade, and then he's like redshirt. Okay? Yeah, but that's, we don't want to get into all that because I don't want the protocols that we're not even getting in. All right, Mr. Healy, do you want to move it? All right, we have a second, Mr. Mazzone. Any last questions or comments? Hearing none, Mr. Kelly, please take roll. Mr. Rutherford?
Yes.
Mrs. Cole? Yes. Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Mr. Healy? Yes. Mrs. Jones? Yes. Mr. Mazzone?
Yes.
Dr. Racine? Yes. Mr. Sprayberg?
Yes.
Dr. O'Hara? Yes. Motion carried. All right, and finally, we'll move on to buildings and grounds. Mr. Sprayberg? We're busy with this.
And, Bill, looking at, uniform building school. I didn't picture it and everything else and both of those things that I see.
we're very, a couple of screens that we can't, so I goes a few other little items in those forms. So, we are working on getting a drone picture of it, which will, if we don't get it in time for this electronic newsletter, it's going to have to use another newsletter. But it just really does look great. It's going to be great. Boom to our programs and the town programs.
When do we think that'll start being able to be used?
It can be used now. I should clarify. When I spoke to Mr. Fraser middle of last week, he had said there was one test that we're going to do perfect on that day, and then we'd be good to go. My assumption was, I never heard the contract, it's going to have everything's all right. But I'm assuming it's good. Yeah, to be locked when it's not being used by somebody. We're going to work with recreation and with users to make sure that it's not. We don't want it to be something that,
It's not a public park, and we have people that do all sorts of things out there, you know, with parties and their dogs and whatever, and we're not, you know, so it's going to be locked when we're not using it. It always was. I mean, it was always a problem. I mean, I would come out when I was a principal here and say to people, you can't be on the field, you can't be on the field. There's a liability issue. There's you know, it's not a public park. So, so yeah, it will be locked. But obviously, we're going to work with, you know, rec or any other group that has permits to use the field to make sure that either our custodians lock it when they're done or give them the ability to lock it.
All right. We're going to move on now to old business. Ms. Jones.
I attended the Washington School PTA meeting on January 3rd, it was the day after our meeting. They had many people there. Unfortunately, Mr. McKay wasn't there, but they wrapped up their year. They have loads of money to do their, it amazes me how much they raise, you know, but they're in great shape.
Excellent. Any other old business?
Yeah,
Mr. Healy?
yes, I attended the Kinder Center PTA the first week in January, and they too went over their budgets, which is fine, you know, good shape, and all their activities very impressive. And they also shared appreciation for Mrs. Coy and her staff, you know, very nice. That was it.
Excellent. Anything else? All right, then we will move on to legislative updates. Ms. Jones.
They posted about 40 or 50 ones on January 9th, but they were carryover from bills that have not done anything, and they're moving them up. So I'm just going to give one tonight. This is Assembly Bill 3204, sponsored by Assemblywoman Aurora K. Dunn from District 25, which is Morris and Passaic, and Assemblyman John D. DeMayo, District 23, which is from Huntington, Somerset, and Warren. Requires public schools to post curriculum plans online. Requires school districts to make textbooks or other materials used in implementing these curricular plans available for inspection by parents or legal guardians.
That's already in policy where,
I thought so, but.
right. It's an election year coming up.
All right, thank you, Ms. Jones. All right, 8:54 p.m., we're going to open the meeting to the public for anything related to or not related to the agenda. Any comments? All right, hearing none, we're going to close the meeting at 8:54 p.m. There is a need for an executive session for us to go over 2 student issues, a legal update, and a personnel matter.
5-10 minutes. I mean,
All right, we're going to go into executive session for about 5-10 minutes. Do I have a motion? All right, Mr. Bogosian, Mr. Sprayberry seconds. All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you.